Okay then, this review of Avatar The Last Airbender Book 1 Water. Avatar The Last Airbender is a show that has a core concept that I think is very cool and surprising that it hasn't been done much before. The concept, of course, is that there are people that can control the four classic elements, like in Chinese culture: water, earth, fire, and air. This concept by itself can be imagined in a multitude of different ways and in different settings. The sequel to the series, The Legend of Korra, is a good example of this because it takes place in a different time and in a much more modern world, though it doesn't take place in a 21st century world. Avatar takes place in a world that feels very old, but with characters that are timeless. However, judging from the map in the opening titles, the geography is very different from our world, with pieces of land falling under one of the four elements. Speaking of characters, this series has great and well-developed characters that I never get tired of watching. Our protagonist is Aang, an airbender who is destined to become the Avatar, the master of all four elements. He ends up being frozen in an iceberg for 100 years, and in those 100 years, the Fire Nation started a war and they took over. Aang in the first season especially is a very fun character. My favorite aspect about him is that he freely admits that he's just a goofy kid, and he has a good sense of humor like Uncle Iroh says most airbenders do in the second season. He's a strong bender and it comes rather naturally to him since he picks up waterbending pretty quickly. He's nowhere near perfect, however, especially when he attempts to learn firebending. He also gets jealous in the episode Bato of the Water Tribe because he is ignored. This is probably because all the airbenders have been wiped out, thus having lost his family. So that's why he feels like, that his family needs to be around him. The two other main characters are siblings, Sokka and Katara from the Southern Water Tribe, with Katara being a waterbender. Katara, like most of the other characters, is also well handled and has many different dimensions. She's really angry whenever someone calls attention to her gender, and is a bit naive, especially in the episode Imprisoned, where she really thinks just talking to the prisoners in the Fire Nation prison will convince them to rebel. One of her weirder quirks is that episode, The Fortune Teller, where she is obsessed about having everything about her future being told to her. Sokka is actually a character that I didn't like too much at first because he was just a stick in the mud. However, after a few episodes I quickly came to like him, and he's one of my favorite characters in the show, and he is one of the most fun characters in the show. In some ways, Sokka is the opposite of Katara since he starts off pretty sexist, which changes in the episode The Warriors of Kyoshi, where he develops a bond with Suki of the Kyoshi Warriors, and that comes into play much more in the next two seasons. Sokka is at his best in the episode The Fortune Teller. I don't know why this episode keeps coming up since it's nowhere near my favorite in this season. But Sokka is really funny because he is completely against believing in Aunt Wu's fortune telling, unlike Katara. His best moment in the episode is when he encounters a man wearing red shoes that Aunt Wu told him he would be wearing when he first met his true love. So Sokka asks him how many times he has worn them since the prediction, and the man tells him he has been wearing them all the time, and just Sokka flips out and says, "Then of course it will happen!" This kind of sense of humor runs through the characters and for most of the season, making Sokka my second favorite character in the show. The two main antagonists this season are Prince Zuko and Admiral Zhao. Admiral Zhao is the most evil of the two, and he is an okay villain, but has nowhere near the amount of depth that the main characters have. He is basically power-hungry and has no restraint, due to his anger. He never felt all that threatening, but he wasn't a bad character, though the villains in the second season are much better. Zuko, being the other antagonist, is extremely well developed since he is also one of the main characters of the entire series. Zuko's backstory is very tragic and shows the true evil of the Fire Nation and his father, the Fire Lord. He is relentlessly determined to capture the Avatar to restore his honor in the Fire Nation. He does have a rivalry with Zhao to capture Aang, which goes on to the final episode of the season. Zuko shows that he is much more honorable than Zhao because when they have a duel, Zuko spares Zhao, and even in the final episode, Zuko tries to save Zhao after he ordered Zuko to be blown up. Zuko also has a great relationship with his uncle Iroh. His relationship with Uncle Iroh is played for both humor and true character emotions. Zuko is a pretty stoic character, so I really enjoy when he is humorous because it shows more sides to him. One of my favorite Zuko/Iroh moments is in the episode The Southern Air Temple, where Zhao asks what happened to Zuko's ship, which had been demolished by Aang, and Zuko says, "That's an interesting story. Uncle, tell Commander Zhao what happened." And Uncle Iroh is completely caught off guard. The more dramatic part of their relationship is that Uncle Iroh views Zuko as a son, and actually cares about him more than his own father. Uncle Iroh is, by the way, my favorite character in the series, since he is such a fun character with a lot of warmth. Also, he is a badass Fire Nation general that can actually fight enemies. He can also actually see things from the spirit world, such as Avatar Roku's dragon. Speaking of Avatar Roku, one of the most fascinating aspects of the show is the Avatar cycle and the spirit world. The spirit world is such an odd place that it's hard to explain why it's so fascinating. Aang bridges man and spirit, and these spirits are both good and evil characters. The spirit Heibai is angry because of the Fire Nation burning the forest, and the spirit Ko steals faces of those that talk to him and show emotion, for example. The Avatar reincarnation cycle makes Aang a character with thousands of past lives, which is where his wisdom and Avatar state comes from. Before wrapping up, I'll just go through my top 5 episodes of the season, with little to no spoilers. Number 5 for me is The King of Omashu. This episode is so much fun, and Aang and his friends sliding through the city is just awesome, and the king himself is really cool too. He's just so odd and seems plain crazy. A great moment is when Katara tells him to let us leave, and the king just responds with let us leave, and just eats a piece of lettuce. This episode has lots of great humor, and Aang actually learns a lesson of thinking outside of the box. Number 4 for me is The Siege of the North Part 2. This is a really cool season finale on so many levels, especially on the animation level. This episode looks great, and the environment itself goes through changes from becoming completely red to black. When Aang goes in the Avatar state and forms Koizilla, as the creators of the show called it, it looks incredible with the coloring on the creature being incredibly bright and vibrant blue. It's a shame that few other animated action shows in America have this level of animation and design. Aang also goes to the spirit world and meets Ko, who is such a creepy and unique character. The stakes are high and the emotions are strong. This is a great episode. Number 3 for me is The Deserter. This episode begins with lots of fun as well, because Aang and his friends go to a Fire Nation festival. However, the episode goes into darker territory since Aang convinces a deserter of the Fire Nation named John John to teach him firebending. Aang shows that he is undisciplined, which leads him to accidentally burning Katara's hands. It is a bit convenient that she discovers that she can use waterbending to heal herself, but this experience clearly affects Aang, who vows never to firebend again. John John is also interesting since he is bitter about being a firebender. He says that fire is life, and if uncontrolled, it can destroy everything it touches. This episode is also called back on in Book 3, since Aang finally has to learn how to firebend. Number 2 is The Storm. This is probably the darkest episode of the season, which shows the backstory of both Aang and Zuko. Both stories are very tragic, though Zuko's I would say is darker, after all he is the villain. Aang's father figure was Monk Gyatso, and he is incredibly likable and affectionate towards Aang. It turns out that Aang ran away because everything he loved, including Gyatso, was being taken away because of the responsibility of being the Avatar. Zuko, who cared about the Fire Nation soldiers, disrespected an elderly general by speaking out of turn, telling him not to sacrifice the new recruits. Because of this disrespect, Zuko is forced to duel with his father. Zuko is distraught that he had no intention of disrespecting his father and is unwilling to fight his father. His father considers him weak and cowardly, so he scars Zuko's face and banishes him from the Fire Nation. This episode shows how Aang deals with the guilt of running away, while at the same time Zuko shows humanity. The emotions in this episode are truly incredibly developed and very strong. Finally, let's move on to my favorite episode of the first season, though it's only a hair above The Storm for me. I don't know if anybody else will put this as the best episode of the first season, but my favorite is the Blue Spirit. This episode is probably one of the more unique ones of the first season because Aang has to go on an adventure on his own because Sokka and Katara are sick and Aang needs to get them medicine. At the same time, this is a fascinating Zuko episode which shows his relationship with the Fire Nation and how the Fire Nation complicates his life. Excuse me. The Blue Spirit is such a cool idea that lends itself to some great imagery. The Blue Spirit is a guy with broadswords and a pretty creepy blue mask with a smile. Aang is captured by Admiral Zhao and has to work with the Blue Spirit to escape. Since the Blue Spirit doesn't speak, there are great places with no dialogue, and we can just focus on the action and suspense. The music is very interesting this episode since it has a percussion cue that, or at least I think it's percussion, I don't know for sure, but anyway, it has a cue that repeats several times in this episode that provides an odd tone that not many other episodes have. It's kind of hard to explain, but the tone that the music sets is very kind of somber, but it's not completely dark. It's kind of weird. But anyway, the reveal at the end, which I won't spoil here, is great, and it even has an ending that is both somber and lighthearted at the same time. I noticed that my top episodes focus a lot on Aang and Zuko, even though they are not my favorite characters. I'll mention a few honorable mentions that didn't make the top 5. Winter Solstice Part 2, where Aang meets Avatar Roku, is great because Avatar Roku himself is such an interesting character that gives important exposition. The Great Divide, where two tribes, one is uptight and the other is filthy, cannot get along because of a conflicting story where it is not clear whether which side wronged who. Aang's solution to this problem is great, and it's one of my favorite moments with him in the entire series. The last honorable mention is Jet, where they meet a charming young man called Jet in the woods who has a grudge against the Fire Nation, which leads him to do a terrible thing. Sokka has some great moments this episode, and for some reason this is the episode I saw rerun the most on TV for some reason. Weird. All in all, Avatar The Last Airbender is a great series that is lots of action, adventure, fun, with a genuine emotions and genuine characters. This is also a very effective all-ages show that anybody can enjoy, be it adults, kids, teenagers. This is just a very well-done show that anybody can watch. This is a very good first season that builds on later episodes. Forgive the length of this review, but I cannot recommend this show enough, and I just wanted to share my personal favorite episodes. Thanks for watching, and next time I hope to do a review on Superman vs. the Elite. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching again. Feel free to to discuss your favorite episodes in the comments.